I'm going to continue on here with my discussion of guitar tone. If you haven't seen the first video, you can find it. That's where I explain why it's important to have good guitar tone. Now I'm going to get into a little bit of how you do it, how you get a good tone. As I said in the previous video, you have to have a good instrument, a good amplifier, and you have to have good pedals if you are going to be a person who uses pedals. And in regard to pedals, my rule of thumb is take every pedal that you're not using out of the circuit. Because every time you go through, every time this tiny signal that comes from a guitar is less than a volt, every time it goes through a connection, even if it's just a 1/4-inch cable plugged into a jack, you're losing a tiny bit of integrity in that signal. And if you're going through what's called an op amp or a buffer amp in a pedal, like a Boss pedal, you're going through a very cheap amplifier that is going to also degrade your tone. So anything that you're not using, if you have a wah pedal plugged in on your pedal board and you're not going to use it on this song, get it out of the circuit. Here's an example of how important just one little element can be. I had a guy recording in my studio some years ago, and he was pretty much as much a tone fanatic as I am, you know. And so he wasn't satisfied with his tone. We'd been working on his tone for well over an hour, and he was blasting in my studio through a Rivera 50 or 100 watt amp at full volume. And I mean, it was oppressive, you know, and I like loud. I'm a loud guy, but this was just, it was really oppressive. So he wasn't happy, and he was plugged into a Boss TU-12 tuner and then into the amp. And so I said to him, why don't you take that tuner out of the circuit? And he says, well, what difference is that going to make? I said, just try it. And so he did, and he played about 2 or 3 notes, and he went, whoa, what the hell? He couldn't believe that the tone came alive the way it did, because that pedal was wasting a tiny amount of the guitar signal and therefore compromising the guitar signal. So you couldn't get the full value that was there coming from the guitar. So get rid of anything you're not using, and make sure that every pedal you do use is giving you a net gain. For instance, I use, it's a Carl Martin compressor, and I have it turned on virtually all the time. Once in a while, if I want to turn down with that and I don't have time to reach for the volume control on the guitar, I'll turn the compressor off, and that'll lower my volume a little bit. And it does compromise certain things. It does take a toll on the signal, but it does more good than it does bad. So I keep it plugged in all the time. And then I go into a Zen Drive, which is my distortion pedal, my overdrive pedal. There again, it's not perfect. It's not my imaginary tone from heaven, but it is doing more good than it is harm. And then I go into, well, first I go into a Peterson Stomp tuner, you know, just a Strobo Stomp. And then I go into the Carl Martin, and then I go into the Zen Drive, and then it's into the amp. Now, occasionally I'll use a wah pedal, occasionally I'll use a delay pedal, but if I'm not going to use it in the song that I'm actually playing at this moment, I'm not going to plug it in, because I know it's going to degrade my tone. So get pedals that you don't use out of there. Here's some of the crazy things I've done over the years to get a tone. I'm going to walk over here and get my Stratocaster. This is the guitar that I played with Miles Davis. It's a 1984 Stratocaster Standard. It's a strange Strat. I've never known another guitar like this. The output jack, as you can see, is on the pickguard, not on the body where it would normally be. The only model I've ever seen that doesn't have an output jack here on the body. And that actually turned out to be a good thing for me, because it allowed me, when I wanted to check out different pickups for this guitar, I could wire up a pickguard with the new pickups on it, and then go to the gig, try the pickups out. Every time I did this, I hated them immediately. And rather than being stuck for the whole rest of the night playing with pickups I don't like, I could just switch out the pick guard. So I could get off stage, end of the first set, get a screwdriver, take all these screws out of the pick guard, loosen the strings, pull the pick guard out, put the old pick guard back in with actually these pickups, the EMGs, and then play the rest of the night with the tone I know that works. That's the kind of stuff I have done over the years to try to find the perfect tone. You know, I knew I was never going to find a perfect tone, but you just keep going as far as you can. Let's see, what else? Oh, this is very important. It's my belief that you can't really get a great guitar tone unless you are driving the power tubes in your amplifier. Now, I'm setting aside modeling amps for the moment. I'm talking about if you're playing through a real amp, you know, at volume, at stage volume. When they came out with master volume amps, they didn't work right, for me at least, because they were based on the idea that you overdrive the power tubes, the 12AX 7As, and then you limit the amount of signal that gets to the power tubes, the 6L6 GCs, or EL34s, or whatever it is you have. And that provides you with a kind of a grindy, buzzy distortion that I don't really care for. If you can overdrive the power tubes, especially 6L6s, that's the tubes I like the best, then you get this warmth, you get this kind of a touch sensitivity, we call it, where when you play a note softly, it sounds clear and pretty, and when you stand on it and really dig in, it sounds powerful and strong. And that brings me to something else, which is that a great guitar tone contains elements that would seem to be in opposition to each other, like strength and delicacy, power and subtlety. If you don't have all those elements, then you don't have a whole tone. You have a part of a tone. If all you have is aggression, then you're limited. You know, when aggression is appropriate, then you have it. But when you need to sound pretty, you can't do it. So you have to have a tone that bridges all these stylistic considerations and gives you a vocabulary that you can really make some meaningful music with. There'll be more on this